Hello, this is Brian Rowe with Mythic MTG Tech, and I'm talking about something a little bit different today, chess. The reason being is that my favorite local game store, Card Kingdom, is running a monthly chess night, the first of which will be tomorrow, Wednesday, January 6th at 6 p.m. at their Ballard location. I'm going to be helping run that. For a little bit of background about me and chess, during the end of high school, my first few years out on my own, and through undergrad, I spent a pretty good amount of time teaching chess at elementary schools and middle schools. It was one of the ways that I paid for coffee and occasionally rent. I am an avid chess fan, and I really enjoy teaching the game. I still currently teach between 1 and 3 students, mostly adults, occasionally a very dedicated middle schooler or elementary school kid that really wants to get better at the game. I enjoy teaching chess a lot, and a lot of my philosophy around improving at Magic or playing strategic board games comes from my background in chess. I don't play a lot of competitive chess anymore because I really enjoy playing Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone. Those are the two things that take up kind of my competitive focus time at this point. But I'm getting back into chess a little more heavily currently, and I'm super excited that Card Kingdom is going to be running this night. As I mentioned, the night is tomorrow night over at their Ballard location, and anybody can drop by. It's going to be a casual event, an opportunity for people to just learn about chess, anything from how the pieces move to basic strategy. We're going to be covering a little bit of endgame stuff. I'm going to have some endgame positions and a night drill set up for people to play, and then there'll be an opportunity for people to play against each other. It'll be going on for a few hours. I also post a pretty good amount of chess puzzles on both my Instagram, as you saw earlier, and over on my Facebook. A lot of those, not all of them, come from chess.com. They've got the best tactical trainer online. It is extremely good. I'm going to go through 2 of those problems that got a lot of comments on Facebook and talk about the solution for them, and I'm going to walk through my thought process on them. One of these problems is one that I did rather well on in the tactical trainer, and the other one I screwed up halfway through, and I'm going to point out where I screwed up and what the flaw was, because I think you actually learn more from the chess problems that you make mistakes on than the ones that you get right away. So this is the first problem, and to get the most out of this, I would pause the video for a second, focus on the board, see if you can come up with the best move, and then follow it through for the next few moves until you have a significant advantage. Either you have won a piece or several pieces or checkmated the opponent's king. The yellow spot here shows you where the last piece moved. So black just retreated that knight, and that may be important. And then I'm going to walk you through my process. Whenever I am doing a chess puzzle or doing practical tactics calculations at the board, the first thing that I do is look at the material situation and kind of the strategic factors. In this case, we've got a few things that should point to a tactic right away. One of those is the misplaced queen over here. The other one is that white's got a pretty dominant position. His pieces are coordinated in the center of the board. Black's pieces are kind of spread out across the board. So those are the things that really tell me there may be a tactic in this situation. In calculating for a tactic, usually you start with the checks and the captures. There are no checks here, and the only capture is to really throw your rook at your opponent's king, of which the knight could easily go back and take that, or the king, that doesn't really lead anywhere. So the next thing you look at is threatening moves or forcing moves. Forcing moves is the terminology that I like a lot. And that's where the candidate move bishop g5 comes out. This is very strong. You're threatening the queen right away, and you're also threatening the rook on d8. But let's go back for just a second. In that initial evaluation, you also look at kind of the material situation here. White, although he has a very strong position, is also down a piece, a minor piece. We've got 3 minor pieces for black, and we only have 2 minor pieces for white. So several of the people who commented on this moved here, and then the queen tries to move out of the way, and they immediately just took the rook on d8. If material were even, that would be enough to give you an advantage, that exchange up. Although a minor piece for a rook is not always winning, and this is a very closed position. Those rooks aren't that useful. This is where the puzzle really got difficult for individuals, and it took me a while to puzzle through this myself. And the next move here is to threaten that trapped queen. Rook g4 is it, and rook g4 is a wonderful move. It's rook lift that threatens to move over and capture the queen. Black's best response at this point is to pull the knight up and threaten the rook. You just move the rook over and win the queen for a rook. Very, very strong move, and it should leave you with a significant material advantage and a winning position. The next tactic here that we're looking at was definitely one of the more difficult ones that I've done recently. I made it partway through this before making a mistake on it, and this is where it's a great example of figuring out the mistake that you made and learning from it. Definitely suggest pausing here, trying to come up with your own solution before we jump in. Looking at this position fresh, the first thing that I look at is the material situation, and black is up a piece, although white has a lot of pressure on both of the wings. There's a pin on one side where black is threatening to go after the bishop on a7. The rooks are not connected yet for black, and on the other side there's a lot of pressure on the king. From black's perspective, though, there's also some very interesting things going on. The two white rooks are not connected, so the rook on a1 is undefended. And whenever you see an undefended piece, that should be a huge red light for you saying, hey, there's an opportunity here, there's a tactic, there could be a tactic. Let's at least calculate and see if anything's going on. So the first thing that you always check is checks, and there are no good checks. You could throw your queen at your opponent, but that's not going to do anything. And then captures. The captures here is where we find the right line. Bishop takes on d4 is really, really strong. It's a double attack because it allows the queen and the bishop to put pressure on f2 while simultaneously attacking the rook on a1. Here, white only really has one opportunity to keep material, which is to take the rook on a8, and then black has to prove that he has enough compensation going after that king that is stuck in the middle of the board. And that's exactly what happens here. Now at this point, I follow through with the threat on the king, and I've calculated to a point where I believe that I have a significant advantage against my opponent's king. I start with queen f2 here, the king retreats, and then in this position I went to increase the pressure on the king by playing bishop takes c3. Now, I missed the defensive resource that is available to white in this position, and there's a much stronger move than this bishop takes c3. The reason bishop takes c3 fails is that this rook is able to come back and defend this knight, and the attack fails at that point. The much stronger move here is bishop g4 check, threatening the queen and also threatening the undefended rook on a8. The other nice thing about this check is that it pulls the queen away from the defense of the rook on h8. So not only are we threatening the king, threatening the queen, but we also happen to be indirectly going after both rooks. The only reasonable move here is to take the bishop, and then we immediately win the rook on a8. Now, white has to deal with the dual threats of going after the king in the center of the board and defending the rook that is over here on the edge of the board. The current threat is to take the rook for an a8, play it down to a1, and win the rook, having a significant material advantage. The move that white chooses here is to defend the rook right away. And the follow-up here is very important because white is threatening to do a significant amount of damage to the black king here. Black follows up by defending the pawn on g5 while simultaneously attacking the knight and making threats against the white king. At this point, black has a significant advantage with the threats on the king. White could try to defend by pulling the knight back, but we end with a mate here. Another reasonable attempt at defense would be taking the knight back to b1, at which point the rook, queen, and bishop together are going to chase down the black king and at least win some material. The important part here is that this bishop does a great job of holding back white's forces in this position. One other thing worth mentioning is that the immediate rook attack fails here because white is able to consolidate a defense by checking and eventually mating black's king. The rook is doing an important defensive effort early on in this tactic. Thanks, this has been Brian Rowe with Mythic MTG Tech, talking a little bit about chess today with 2 chess puzzles and the announcement of the monthly chess night over at Card Kingdom here in Ballard. I hope to see some local players out there who have some interest in chess.